everyone. It's Katie from the West Dallas Public Library, here today with Books Live with Katie. And we're going to get started in a few minutes. I just thought I'd get the video on. It is a little dark up here today, probably because outside is a little bit gloomy. So, again, I'm Katie, one of the librarians here at the West Dallas Public Library. And today we are going to be talking about some weird and wonderful books. And I know it's a really weird and kind of not exact science or title even, but it's my way of sharing books that really made an impression on me, as well as books that I read a long time ago that have just kind of stuck with me. So these are all older titles. In fact, I think there's really only one book that was written in the past year. But this is my, Books Live with Katie, and we're talking about weird and wonderful books. And part of the reason is I'm in a little bit of a reading rut. It's hard as a librarian to admit, like, oh no, I haven't been reading lately. But there's a lot of reasons why. I just haven't found the right book for my mood right now. I'm sure, like everyone else, there's just a lot going on. Also, something that I know I forget about is if you do read to kids or other people in your life, you might not be choosing the books you want to read. I can imagine teachers feel this way a lot when they're reading for lesson planning or starting new units with younger kids, that they're not necessarily reading stuff they want, and it might be harder to get that going. So let's get started. Again, these are my weird and wonderful books. And these are books that when I talk about, they either made an impression on me or there's something like I always think about fondly. But if you ask me what it's about, I'll go, well, it's about, and then I pause because it's usually a lot of things. The first book is actually the newest book, and it's one I read to my daughter last year. It is a graphic novel called Bug Boys. It's by Lori Knetzger, I'm going to guess. And it's just this delightful graphic novel. It is written for kids about two bugs. They're beetles, stag bee and rhino bee, and it's their adventures. And what's great about this book is it's these two bugs going on adventures, but it also has a lot of themes about like growing up, finding your place in the world, realizing the world is bigger than you ever imagined. And we read this last year at the beginning of lockdown, and it was just delightful, but also very philosophical. Brings up lots of good questions about the meaning of life, what it is to learn, what it is to grow up, what it is to find your place not only in your community, but to maybe move on from your community and do bigger, better things. I'm not gonna lie, I was just delighted by this book last year. It is a series, a graphic novel series, and it's a quick read, even though we did spend a couple nights with it, because it was just one of those books you didn't want to end. And I think kids do enjoy it, and they probably do get it, but reading it as an adult really made an impression on me. And I jokingly said it's a perfect book to read in the middle of an existential crisis. So if you have a young philosopher, or you just want a quiet, gentle read that kind of discusses the meaning of life and what it is to grow up and find your place in the world, highly recommend Bug Boys. Again, it's just delightful, and I think that when you read kids' books as an adult, you just get different layers of maybe things you didn't notice as a child. Granted, this is a newer book, so I wouldn't have been able to read it as a child, but sharing it with a child, or even just reading it to a group of kids might be just a delightful way to spend an afternoon if you have one. So my first weird and wonderful book is the graphic novel Bug Boys. You can check this one out at the library. I think it's funny that a lot of the books I am going to talk about are young adult, and I think it's because young adult books, they have this bigger, what's what I'm looking for? I don't want to say more area to explore these weird books, but more maybe forgiveness and acceptance of the audience. I think my number one pick for weird, wonderful books for young adults is Andrew Smith's Grasshopper Jungle. You don't need to see my notes. Grasshopper Jungle is one of those books that if you ask me what it's about, I will say, well, it's about a boy in Iowa growing up, but it's also about the end of the world, and it's also about how civilization can come to find itself. It's just one of those books that when I read, it was about so much, but also kind of just everyday life. The main character's name is Austin, and I'm going to make sure. Yes, Austin Serva, and he's living in this nowhere Iowa town, and he goes to this place called Grasshopper Jungle with his best friend to kind of get away. They skateboard there, they smoke cigarettes, typical, I shouldn't say typical, kind of teenage rebellion stuff, and they unknowingly unleash the end of the world. They find a bunker. There are giant praying mantises that are pretty much out to mate and also kill, because they're praying mantises, and you can imagine what happens. But don't be turned away by that. It is told in a very cyclical storytelling way. Austen sees himself as a historian, and even before the events that start the end of the world unfold, he sees himself as, it's important to tell the minute details, and you really get that feeling. It's told in a very circular manner, where he comes back to things as he deems them important. So things aren't necessarily told chronologically, but in not only the order that he found out about them or of importance to the story, but kind of in this way that he deems worthy. He has a best friend who he's kind of in love with, and then he has a girlfriend who he's in love with, and it's kind of this growing up, but also the end of the world. Growing up during the end of the world and survival. This might be a great book for these times, but also it's just a weird, wonderful book that it's hard to describe. There is now a sequel that I unfortunately haven't read, but Andrew Smith, just as an author, writes wonderful, weird, kind of fun books. So if you like this one, try other ones. He has a couple more typical books as well. So if you're not ready for this one, I recommend his Winger, which is about a young man in a boarding school. But Andrew Smith's Grasshopper Jungle. I don't have this next one written up, but I can't talk about Andrew Smith without talking about A.S. King. A.S. King is another one of those authors who every book surprises me. This is Please Honor Vera Diez, and this is one of her books that was one of the first I read. I don't think it was her first book, but every book she writes is just wonderful and strange and gives you the human experience. This one, what really stood out for me is there is a chapter told from the point of view of kind of a landmark in her town. She also writes books where someone talks to passengers on airplanes flying over by. That's called Ask the Passengers. There's one about reality TV. But A.S. King is kind of my counterpoint to Andrew Smith, two young adult authors who just write weird, wonderful books. A lot of their books have stuck with me, and I highly recommend them if you're looking for one of those books with, for lack of a better word, stick-to-itiveness that sticks with you. Okay, I'm trying to see two more YA books, and then we'll get to the books that are published for adults. But I honestly, as an adult, I love these books, and I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I find more creative stuff in young adult, and that's not an insult to adult books, because I'm the young adult librarian. Those are the books I'm aware of that are coming out. But also I just think there is more room for that kind of experimental writing. Which brings me to Libba Bray. Libba Bray is one of those authors that she's probably on my list of people I would love to just have a conversation with or listen to her talk. But her Going Bovine is one of those weird and wonderful books that I remember laughing, it being surreal, it being just bizarre. And what you need to know about this book, it's about a young man whose best day of his life is when he almost died at Disney World. And he's part of this high-performing family, and he's kind of a slacker. And it's kind of like no one really cares about him, he just exists. Until he ends up with Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, what we know as mad cow disease, and ends up in the hospital, and then has to go on this life-saving journey with a dwarf and an angel and odd characters. And there's nobody guiding him to find this life-saving procedure except the tabloids. He has to follow the tabloids. It is kind of based around Don Quixote, but the best part about this book for me is you never know, is it really happening? Because you're like, well, is this real? Is he truly on this journey? Or is it just he's in a hospital and this is what's going on in his brain as his mind is going, slowly going away. It is funny, it is smart, it is one of those books that as you read it, again, you're like, is this realistic? Is this not? Is it magical realism? But Libba Bray is one of those fun authors, and if you're looking for something truly weird and wonderful, you're going to want to check out Going Bovine. Okay, my next book is one of the weirdest books I've ever read. And when I remember reading a review for it and thinking, how does this book exist? It is called My Favorite Band Does Not Exist. It's about a young man named, I gotta get the names right because the names are important in this book, Deity. And he feels like he's trapped in a book and that he's gonna die on page 64. So to kind of escape this life, he makes up a band called Utopia and posts stuff online about this band, about their albums, about their concerts. And then you find out there is this band called Utopia led by Reacher Mirage, and he doesn't know how this information is getting out there because he hasn't told anyone. So here's this kid like rooting his band and his secret and all this stuff he's supposed to be working on. And there's a science fiction book in it, a fantasy book in it, and that's the book that this guy is supposed to die on page 64 of. So again, there's a book, there's a band, there are two characters, there's a love interest. However, the reason I think this book should be read and circulated is it has the greatest back cover art of all time, as far as I'm concerned. Are you ready? Fire skulls, run a bit. I don't know why I said it like that. But this to give you an idea of what this book kind of is about. So you have this fantasy novel plus the book and this idea of, again, who am I? Do I create the world? You know, these two people kind of creating each other's lives. Weird book. Will stick with you. And again, best back cover of all time. It gives you kind of that feeling of what it's about. You kind of have I don't think the band is metal per se, even though it has that kind of heavy metal feeling. So if you're a music fan, just like weird books, My Favorite Band Does Not Exist is my weird, wonderful pick. One of my weird, wonderful picks. Okay. Again, when it comes to books written for adults, again, I don't have as much experience with them, which sounds weird because I've been reading them since I was probably 12. But for current books, however, I would be remiss to not mention my next book for the only reason that in the middle of this book there is a PowerPoint presentation. And of course I'm talking about Jennifer Egan's Visit from the Goon Squad. This is a group of intertwining stories kind of about the music industry and these characters who both influence each other but don't always meet, and they all kind of get wrapped together in the end. There's these threads that pull through it. I love stories like this. Another one that I know I read at about the same time is Jhumpa Lahari's The Unaccustomed Earth, where you have these multiple they feel like short stories, but then slowly you see the same characters pop up, you see the same dates and times and events coming up, almost in that James Joyce Dubliners or even Ulysses type tradition, where the narrative structure isn't necessarily this is one story happening to one person, but multiple stories of people influenced by the same events. But again, the reason I am recommending this for Weird and Wonderful is for the very sole reason. There is an entire chapter told in PowerPoint. I always wondered what the audiobook was like because it was such a visual chapter, but I guess it would probably be like listening to graphic novels on audio, which I know they do as well, that there'd be some description of the images. So if you have listened to the audiobook for this, let me know, because like I said, I was always curious about it. This is just one of those books that did stick with me, and for the very reason it has a chapter told in PowerPoint. But I will also recommend Jhumpa Lahari's The Unaccustomed Earth. I could not find her copy. I was very sad because it has that same structure of short stories that are then intertwined together, and then at the end you see how they all come together to make kind of a beautiful story. Hers was more touching. This is such a weird thing. As opposed to just being like, oh, this is a weird story. It was a little bit more touching and heartbreaking, whereas I remember the Jennifer Egan book being a little bit more just weird and wonderful. Okay. This next book is just weird to describe. I am also going to preempt this by saying I have not read this book in 20 years, and it still sticks with me. I am talking about Geek Love by Katherine Dunn. I took this great course in college, and this is one of the novels I read. There are 2 books from that class that I recommend to this day, And I will also point out that we read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, which Blade Runner was based on, and that is not one of the books I recommend. So this class really opened my eyes to weird and wonderful fiction, but Geek Love is the one that I think just fits what we are talking about today. Geek Love is about a family who are in carnivals, and the mom was the geek in the carnival that married her dad, and so there's a family. Sorry, I'm getting away with myself. Again, these are hard to describe sometimes. So, and they realized they could be more successful at a carnival or circus thing if they had their own freak show. So they purposely tried to do things so that these kids could be born with anomalies. Their oldest is born as kind of a fish boy with fins instead of feet. They have conjoined twins. They have the main character who is an albino dwarf with a hunchback. And they have a son who looks completely normal, but then you find out has some telekinetic powers. Again, with a family like that, the book's going to be odd, but it's also, because they're on the road, they're a traveling kind of carnival family, you have a different growing up in the sense of loyalty to the family over everything. I remember reading this book and being like amazed that you can take such unusual characters and make them so relatable, because the themes of family and friendship and loyalty and who do you protect comes at all costs. I will also say that the most memorable part of this book, I think, is the end, and I don't want to spoil it. But if you're looking for probably a little bit more straightforward read with just weird and wonderful characters, Geek Love by Katherine Dunn. Another book that came to mind, and I don't have the author, which is kind of problematic because there's multiple books with this titles. There was a book not too long ago called The Girls about conjoined twins that came out, and I remember it being a great kind of book discussion book. So if you like experiencing differences in human bodies in literature, and not just weird structural books, Geek Love is a great one. And then I will definitely post this in my YouTube write-up that will go up hopefully this afternoon, if I'll get the author of that book, The Girls, because it's not the newest book called The Girls. It's a few years old. Yeah. I'm going to do 2 quick honorable mentions without talking much about them. Skippy Diez by Paul Murray is another one of those books that just stuck with me. A young man chokes at, I want to say, a donut eating contest, and don't quote me on this, but Skippy Diez starts weird and just continues being weird, but it's wonderful, and you should read it. And then this is another slightly newer book, Elana K. Arnold's What Girls Are Made Of, about a young woman who is dealing with not only some stuff in her personal life, but also writing this project on women, martyrs, and saints. And you get these little snippets of not only her story, but these bizarre things that happen to, I'll say, lesser-known martyrs and saints in the Catholic faith. So these are my weird and wonderful books. These are all books, like I said, that I read sometime in my past and just stuck with me for one reason or another. I tried not to spoil any of them for you, and if I did, I apologize, but trust me, reading these books is where really the magic comes from, and experiencing them. So if you have any weird and wonderful books that you've read, let me know. I'd love to hear them. Like I said, I'm open to just about anything. There are more that I did want to talk about, but again, I know hearing me talk about books for 20 minutes is a lot, so I left a lot off the list that and tried to pick up some ones that maybe had been forgotten or you wouldn't have heard of. I do realize I had a lot of award winners in there, so maybe, and cult classics with Geek Love. So maybe I didn't get as many new books as I had hoped, but these are all strange and wonderful to me, and they're good and readable and fun and disturbing at many times. Okay, so I hope these are enough suggestions for you. I'm going to put all of this up on our Staff Reads blog. It'll be archived here on Facebook, as well as on our YouTube channel, especially if you want more about the authors or titles or the exact book I talked about. We will be back in April, it looks like the 28th, and we are going to be talking about books in honor of our May Community Reads Mental Health Program, which will be centered around the book Beautiful Boy by Dave Sheff and Tweak by his son Nick Sheff. So I hope to see you then, and I hope to see you at the library soon. Thanks for joining me, everyone. Bye.